Have you ever caught yourself lying awake at night, trying to figure life out? You scroll through memories. You rehearse conversations. You map out futures that never come. You run mental simulations over and over again in hopes that something will finally make sense, that something will finally click, and still the silence remains. No matter how much you analyze, life keeps slipping through your fingers. Unresolved, mysterious, messy. That's because life isn't a riddle to be solved. It's not a problem to fix. It's something far more sacred, far more delicate, and far more fleeting. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, knew this well. He once wrote, "Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." And those words, simple, quiet, unsettling, carry the weight of a truth many of us spend our whole lives running from. Because we want life to behave like a machine. We want formulas, instructions, guarantees. We want cause and effect, pain and reward, right and wrong, success and failure, all measured out in predictable doses. But that's not what life is. Life is ambiguous. It's paradoxical. It's full of contradiction, longing, disappointment, joy, sorrow, absurdity, mystery. And Kierkegaard believed that if you spend your entire existence trying to solve it, trying to reduce it to some perfect, logical system, then you miss the very thing that makes it worth living. Kierkegaard wasn't some abstract academic sitting in a tower. He was a man who lived in emotional torment, a man torn between faith and doubt, love and loss, spirit and flesh. He knew what it meant to ache for clarity. He knew what it meant to be human, painfully human. But he also knew this, that the attempt to explain life in neat categories is itself the source of much of our suffering. See, we've been trained to think that the more we understand life, the better we'll be at living it. But what if the opposite is true? What if the more we try to understand, the more paralyzed we become? What if wisdom isn't about having all the answers, but about learning to live without them? There's a deep anxiety that haunts the modern world, the anxiety of uncertainty. We ask, what am I supposed to do with my life? What if I choose wrong? What if I never find my purpose? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? So we search. We watch endless videos. We read books. We chase philosophies. We look for signs, symbols, instructions, anything to give us some control. But Kierkegaard said that the real task of life is not to gain control, but to surrender to it. To say, I will never fully understand why things happen. I will never have perfect certainty. And that's okay, because life isn't a blueprint, it's a leap. Kierkegaard's most famous idea was the leap of faith, not in the religious sense we usually hear, but in a deeply personal, existential one. A leap of faith means choosing to live even when you don't have all the facts. It means embracing life even when it doesn't make sense. It means loving without guarantees, acting without full understanding, showing up again and again in the face of doubt, fear, and failure. And in that leap, in that surrender, something beautiful happens. You stop trying to solve life, and you finally begin to live it. But what does it mean to live? Kierkegaard believed it begins with authenticity. Not performing for others, not chasing trends, not living according to what you're supposed to be, but asking, what do I value? What do I love? What do I fear? What matters to me? Not what makes sense to society, but what makes sense to your soul. This is harder than it sounds, because most of us aren't living, we're copying. We borrow our dreams. We inherit our goals. We repeat other people's lives, hoping they'll give us meaning. But Kierkegaard says, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. Let that settle in. For a moment, the most common despair is not being you. So maybe you don't need to solve life. Maybe you just need to return to it. To drink your coffee slowly. To breathe deeply in the morning air. To feel the sting of heartbreak without numbing it. To laugh without explanation. To dance badly. To try something you're afraid of. To sit with silence. To talk to someone you love. Not to fix anything, just to be with them. Maybe what you've been calling figuring life out was just your fear talking. And maybe what life has been trying to tell you all along is this: you don't need a map. You need a moment. Imagine a tree. It doesn't ask what its purpose is. It doesn't try to solve the meaning of growth. It simply reaches for the sun, slowly, imperfectly, but faithfully. You are not so different. You don't have to figure it all out right now. You don't need to know where it all leads. You don't need to have every piece in place. You just need to live to live truthfully to live vulnerably to live now . So if your mind is spinning, if you're caught in overthinking, if you feel like you're always waiting for the right answer, the right moment, the right you, maybe this is it. Maybe the answer is no answer. Maybe the truth is no formula . Maybe, like Kierkegaard whispered through time, stop trying to solve life and start living it. It always starts with a thought, a quiet, nagging whisper that says, "Why isn't this making sense?" You lie awake at night, staring into the ceiling like it holds answers. You retrace every step of the day, every conversation, every decision. You scroll through the past in your mind like a film editor, trying to cut out the mistakes, trying to make the story smoother, cleaner, more logical. But life doesn't edit that way. No matter how much you analyze, no matter how much you plan, life stays unsolved. Like a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box, like a novel that keeps rewriting itself halfway through. You want clarity, you want certainty, you want to know that everything will make sense eventually. But Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who walked the streets of Copenhagen in the 1800s, restless, melancholy, searching, once said something so simple. It cuts straight through our modern anxiety. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Not a problem, not a puzzle, not a code to crack. A reality to be felt, touched, lived. And that idea, as peaceful as it sounds, is deeply uncomfortable for the modern mind, because everything around us teaches the opposite, that life can be figured out if you just think hard enough, that there's a perfect job, a perfect person, a perfect path, a secret formula for happiness, a checklist for success. But that belief that you must solve life like a problem set leads to one thing: exhaustion. Because when something doesn't click, a relationship, a career, a moment of sadness, we assume something's wrong. We must have made the wrong choice. We must have missed a step. We must not be trying hard enough. And so we try harder, think more, plan deeper. And fall further into anxiety, frustration, and numbness. But Kierkegaard suggests the problem isn't that life is hard to solve. The problem is that we think it should be solved in the first place. He lived in a time of change, the 19th century, when science and reason were beginning to replace religion and myth. People were looking for objective truth in everything, even in how we live our lives. But Kierkegaard pushed back. He believed that life isn't something you understand from a distance. It's something you dive into. He said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. That's not a riddle. That's reality. Only when you look back, months, years later, do the threads begin to weave together. Only then do the heartbreaks start to make sense. Only then do the detours look like necessary steps. But in the moment, while you're living it, it's chaos, it's fog, it's uncertainty. And that's not a mistake. That is life. So what do we do if life can't be solved? How do we live it? Kierkegaard gives us a quiet, powerful answer: authenticity. Not the buzzword, not the Instagram slogan. Real, raw, uncomfortable authenticity. Living not by someone else's meaning, but by your own. Not copying the lives of others, but carving your own with trembling hands. He writes about the self not as something we're given, but something we must become. You are not born finished. You are born with the task of becoming who you truly are. And that task is terrifying, because it means letting go of every shortcut, every borrowed idea, every rule book you thought would make life easier. You cannot outsource your existence. You have to live it yourself. That's why Kierkegaard believed despair wasn't just about being sad. despair, he said, is the sickness of not being yourself, the quiet, aching sense that you're performing your life instead of inhabiting it. You show up to work. You smile at parties. You say what's expected. You do what's right, but something is missing, because deep down you're not in your life, you're watching it, managing it, solving it. You've become a project, a strategy, a resume, not a person. This is why Kierkegaard's message is not just philosophical, it's deeply human. He's not saying give up on thinking. He's not saying don't. Reflect. He's saying stop letting your mind imprison you. Stop waiting for everything to make sense before you start living. Stop holding back your joy until the pain has a reason. Stop thinking your life has to look like anyone else's. Let go of the idea that your existence must fit into a plan. It won't. Plans fall apart. People leave. Emotions rise and vanish without reason. And all the while, life keeps happening, whether or not you understand it, whether or not you're ready. So what if today you stopped trying to solve life? What if, just for a moment, you allowed yourself to feel it without judgment, without control, without analysis? What if you put your feet on the floor, walked outside and said, I don't know what this all means, but I'm here, and I'm living. That's not giving up. That's the beginning of real living. That's what Kierkegaard was pointing toward, not a life of answers, but a life of presence. A life not solved, but felt. There is a kind of quiet war happening inside many of us. Not the loud kind, not the kind others can see, but an invisible tension that lives beneath the surface. It shows up in subtle ways. In the restlessness of scrolling when you're not even interested. In the way your mind races before bed, playing out 100 imaginary futures. In the strange heaviness that lingers even after a good day. And if you trace that feeling to its source, you often find this unspoken thought, I should have it figured out by now. Life. Purpose. Direction. Meaning. We've been taught that these are things we're supposed to figure out. That life should be a straight line from confusion to clarity, from wandering to arrival. But Søren Kierkegaard disagreed. He believed that the obsession with finding the right answer is itself a kind of sickness. What he called existential anxiety, not anxiety in the clinical sense, but a spiritual, psychological unease, the deep discomfort we feel when confronted with freedom, uncertainty, and the vast, unknowable terrain of existence. Kierkegaard wrote, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. At first, that sounds strange. How can freedom, the thing we claim to want most, cause dizziness? But think about it. The more choices you have, the more overwhelmed you feel. The more possibilities exist, the harder it is to commit to just one. And the more you realize that nothing is guaranteed, not success, not love, not even tomorrow. The more terrifying that freedom becomes. We want to feel free, but we also want to feel safe. And freedom, by its nature, is unsafe. It doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't tell you what's right. It asks you to choose, without certainty. And this is what Kierkegaard saw so clearly. That freedom requires faith. Not religious faith necessarily, but the ability to act without full assurance. To leap. Not because you know you'll land, but because not leaping would be a deeper kind of death. But instead of leaping, most of us freeze. We try to solve life so we don't have to live it. We wait until we're absolutely sure before we move. We ask others what we should do. We chase philosophies, gurus, books, quotes, videos, anything to give us a feeling of certainty. But here's the truth Kierkegaard offers us, gently but firmly. Certainty is an illusion. No one knows exactly what they're doing. No one has all the answers. No path is guaranteed to work. And the more you seek perfect certainty, the more you become trapped in your own mind, paralyzed, disconnected, afraid to live fully because you haven't figured it all out yet. This is the tragedy of many modern lives. We think we are being thoughtful, but really, we are being fearful. We call it being careful or weighing our options, but often we are just avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty. Kierkegaard didn't see uncertainty as a problem. He saw it as the raw material of life itself. The goal is not to eliminate anxiety, but to face it honestly and then to act anyway. That is what it means to truly live. Imagine a painter staring at a blank canvas. There are infinite things she could paint, and that infinite freedom makes her hesitate. What if she picks the wrong subject? What if she messes it up? What if she's not as good as she thinks? So she sits there, paralyzed by all the possibilities, waiting for the perfect idea. But the canvas stays blank. That's what many of us are doing with our lives. We think if we wait long enough or think hard enough, the perfect plan will emerge. But in truth, it won't. You have to start painting anyway. Even if it's messy, even if it doesn't go as planned, even if you change your mind later. Because life is not something you get right. It's something you participate in, and it's in the participation, not the perfection, where meaning is born. Kierkegaard often wrote in the language of paradox. He would say things like, "Anxiety is the schoolmaster of possibility," or "You must lose yourself to find yourself." And these weren't just clever turns of phrase, they were reflections of how life actually works. We grow not when we solve life, but when we live with its contradictions. When we learn to hold joy and sorrow in the same breath, when we learn to act in spite of fear, not in the absence of it, when we realize that meaning doesn't come from clarity, but from engagement. Think of the most beautiful moments in your life, the ones that took your breath away. Were they logical? Were they part of a 5-step plan? Or did they arrive unannounced, unsolved, mysterious, like a gift, falling in, love, grieving a loss, starting over, letting go? None of these can be solved, only lived. And this is the heart of Kierkegaard's message. You do not have to wait until you've figured out who you are to live like yourself. You do not have to wait for the right moment to begin. You do not have to wait for life to make sense before you participate in it fully. You are not here to solve life. You are here to live it. To live through the not knowing. To live through the messines. To live through the fear. So, today, if you're waiting for answers, Kierkegaard might gently tell you, you won't find them all, and you don't need to. What you need is the courage to live as if you already had them, not because you do, but because waiting isn't living, and life, this strange, beautiful, unresolvable thing, is already happening, whether you understand it or not, whether you're ready or not. So many of us spend our lives looking for a role to play. We want to be somebody. Somebody successful, somebody admirable, somebody who fits neatly into the expectations around us, the career path, the relationship goals, the image we've cultivated for others. But deep down, beneath all the roles, we quietly wonder, who am I really? Not the person I show the world. Not the one performing in meetings or smiling for photos. Not the version of me who says all the right things, wears the right mask, plays the right part. But me, the person I am when no one's watching. The person who wakes up in the stillness of morning and feels unsure. Søren Kierkegaard believed that this question, who am I, isn't something you answer once. It's something you live into. He wrote, the self is a relation which relates itself to itself. It sounds abstract, but it's actually a profound truth. You are not a finished product. You are a process. You are a becoming. And becoming yourself is the only task that really matters. But here's the paradox. Becoming yourself doesn't mean finding yourself. Like uncovering a buried treasure. It means creating yourself, honestly, painfully, through your choices. Kierkegaard believed that most people avoid this task. Why? Because it's terrifying. To truly become yourself means letting go of everything that isn't you, the dreams you inherited from others. The beliefs you never questioned, the version of you that plays it safe even when your soul is quietly starving. And that kind of self-confrontation is deeply uncomfortable. It's much easier to just follow the crowd, to adopt someone else's answers, to play a socially acceptable role and never ask too many questions. But Kierkegaard warned, this kind of living is the most common form of despair. The greatest danger, that of losing oneself, can occur so quietly that it is almost like not losing anything at all. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself slowly, day by day. Through little betrayals of truth, you say yes when you mean no. You pursue things you don't love just to be admired. You stay silent to avoid judgment. You become a version of yourself that is acceptable, but empty. And the longer you do this, the harder it becomes to hear the voice inside you that says, "This isn't who I am." So how do we begin to become ourselves? Kierkegaard's answer isn't easy, but it's honest. You must choose, not blindly, not recklessly, but consciously, deliberately, with responsibility. He believed that true freedom is not just having options, it's committing to one, and standing behind it with your whole being. In a world that tells you to keep your options open, Kierkegaard tells you something radical. Pick something. Live it. Make it real through action, not just thought, because identity is not found in contemplation. It's forged in commitment. But commitment means risk. When you choose one path, you let go of others. When you decide who you are, you risk rejection. When you speak your truth, you risk being misunderstood. And that's where most people retreat. They'd rather stay in the shallow waters of maybe, someday, and I don't know yet. But Kierkegaard urges us forward into the deep, into the uncertain, into the terrifying beauty of choice, because it is only through choice that we become real. He called this becoming a true self before God, not in the religious sense that many might imagine, but in the sense of becoming fully accountable to your own soul, standing alone, without excuses. Without comparisons, without performance. Just you, with your longing. Your fear, your desire to behold. It's a kind of nakedness, and that's why so few people ever truly live it, because it requires not only courage, but a willingness to stand alone. And yet, there is nothing more meaningful. When you begin to become yourself, truly yourself, everything changes. Conversations become more honest. Work becomes more purposeful. Solitude becomes more peaceful. Even pain becomes more bearable, because you know it's your pain, not someone else's. You are no longer just a reflection of others' expectations. You are a living truth. But don't misunderstand. Becoming yourself doesn't mean you never make mistakes. It doesn't mean you always feel confident. It doesn't mean you have everything figured out. It means you are willing to walk forward even when you don't. It means you accept that life isn't about finding the perfect version of yourself. It's about becoming the most authentic version, the one that aligns with your inner voice, even when it shakes. And that voice, it doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it stirs. Sometimes it only shows up as a quiet ache in your chest, telling you this isn't it, or this is where you belong. And if you listen to that voice, even imperfectly, even slowly, you begin to live a life that feels like yours. In a world full of noise, distraction, and comparison, Kierkegaard's message is a gentle rebellion. Stop trying to fix yourself like a broken machine. Stop waiting for the perfect identity to arrive. Stop asking the world to tell you who you are. Instead, dare to become, even if you don't yet know what that means, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it costs you the approval of others. Because the real danger isn't becoming the wrong person. The real danger is never becoming anyone at all. So today, ask yourself quietly, where am I living someone else's life? Where have I traded truth for comfort? Where have I ignored that still, small voice inside me? And then, just for today, take one small step toward becoming who you are. Not who you're supposed to be. Not who they want you to be. But who you were meant to become all along. There comes a point in every life when the questions become too heavy. You've read the books, watched the videos. Asked for advice, waited for clarity. But nothing gives you the peace you hoped for. You still don't know which direction to take. You still don't know if it will work out. You still don't know what the future holds. And it is precisely here, in the middle of uncertainty, that Søren Kierkegaard offers us one of his most haunting and beautiful ideas. The leap of faith. Not faith in the way we often hear it today. Not just belief in something unseen, but faith in a deeper, more existential sense. Faith that allows you to live without full understanding. To act without perfect certainty. To commit to something even when the outcome is unknown. Kierkegaard saw that human beings crave guarantees. We want to know, if I do this, will it work? If I love, will they stay? If I follow this path, will I succeed? But life doesn't promise those things. It never has. And if you wait for complete certainty before living, you will wait forever. The leap of faith, Kierkegaard says, is not reckless. It is necessary. It's what separates a life observed from a life lived. Because most people don't leap. They hedge. They analyze. They float in a space of endless preparation, always getting ready, but never arriving. And it feels safe there. For a while. Safe in your mind. Safe in your comfort zone. Safe in the illusion of control. But eventually, something begins to ache. Not because you've failed, but because you've refused to try. Kierkegaard knew this ache well. He lived it. He once fell deeply in love with a young woman named Regina Olsen. They were engaged. And yet, he broke it off, not because he didn't love her, but because he feared that his internal struggles, his philosophical despair, his religious crisis, his restless soul, would consume her life too. It tormented him. He wrote about it in his journals. He weaved her presence into his books under different names. He never stopped loving her, and he never married again. Was that the right decision? Did he make the leap, or did he retreat from it? Even Kierkegaard wrestled with these questions. But in that tension, that not knowing, he discovered something universal, that every meaningful life requires a kind of faith. Faith doesn't mean ignoring doubt. It means walking forward with it. It doesn't mean erasing fear. It means moving through fear. Step by trembling step, faith is what allows you to choose this job, this relationship, this path. Not because you are certain it will succeed, but because you know that. Not choosing is its own kind of loss. Faith is the courage to say, I don't know what's next, but I'm going to live anyway. And this leap, it isn't always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's as small as speaking the truth you've been holding in. Sometimes it's quitting the thing that's slowly draining you. Sometimes it's saying yes to something that scares you, or no to something that numbs you. The leap doesn't look the same for everyone, but the feeling is universal. It's that moment when your heart beats faster, when your voice shakes just a little, when you realize you are standing on the edge of the unknown, and still, somehow, you step forward. Kierkegaard believed that real transformation doesn't happen through logic alone. You can't reason your way into courage. You can't overthink your way into becoming. You can't solve your way into living. At some point, you must leap. And that leap is not a what-I'm act. It is a way of being. Every day, we're invited to leap. To leap into love, even when our hearts have been broken. To leap into creativity, even when we doubt our talent. To leap into truth, even when it might cost us something. And in that leap, something remarkable happens. You stop being a spectator, and you become a participant in your own life. But don't confuse this with blind optimism. Kierkegaard wasn't naive. He knew that sometimes the leap leads to pain. To disappointment. To silence. But he also knew this, not leaping is a slower kind of suffering. The suffering of regret. The ache of wondering what could have been, the numbness of a life never truly lived. And so the leap becomes an act of trust. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in yourself. In your capacity to endure. To grow. To become, not in spite of uncertainty, but because of it. The modern world doesn't encourage the leap. It tells you to have a 5-year plan. To move carefully. To brand yourself. To optimize every decision. But what if life is not meant to be optimized? What if it's meant to be experienced fully, imperfectly, fearfully, one moment at a time? What if meaning isn't something you figure out, but something that meets you along the way? Not because you controlled everything, but because you had the courage to live anyway. So, if you are standing at a crossroads right now, if you're staring into the unknown, waiting for a sign, maybe this is it. Maybe the sign is not a lightning bolt. Not a perfect plan, not a sudden wave of confidence. Maybe the sign is that small, trembling part of you that wants to leap, that wants to stop waiting for answers, that wants to begin, that wants to feel something again. And that quiet longing is enough. Kierkegaard reminds us, you don't need to be. Sure, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be willing to show up, willing to try, willing to live. Even without a guarantee, that is the leap. And it just might be the beginning of the life you've been waiting for. So you've let go of trying to solve life. You've started to see that becoming yourself is not a destination, but a direction. You've faced the terrifying freedom of not knowing. You've stood on the edge of doubt, and perhaps for the first time you've leapt. But still, something lingers, a quiet question, a restlessness that won't fully go away. What now? How do I keep living without answers? Because even after you choose, even after you begin to live your own truth, the uncertainty doesn't disappear. And this is where Søren Kierkegaard offers his final wisdom, that living fully is not about solving your questions. It's about living them. To live your questions means to stop running from the unknown. To stop treating every unsolved part of your life as a problem to be fixed. To stop expecting closure for every open loop in your heart. It means waking up each day and saying, I don't know how this all fits together, but I will live it anyway. Not because you gave up, but because you finally let go of needing to control it all. This is not passivity. It is bravery. Bravery in the most human, quiet, ordinary form. To eat a simple meal and truly taste it. To sit with your sadness without rushing it away. To love someone without knowing how long they'll stay. To pursue what calls you, not because you're sure, but because it's real for you. Kierkegaard believed that we often live outside of our lives in ideas, theories, abstractions. We talk about life more than we live it. We wait for the perfect version of life to begin, one without anxiety, without fear, without loss. But that version never comes. Life only happens here in the mess, in the mystery. In the quiet, unglamorous decisions of everyday existence. This is what he called subjective truth. Truth that isn't given to you. Truth that isn't universal or scientific. Truth that is lived through your body, your soul, your experience. You don't learn it, you become it. And that kind of truth can't be rushed. There's a line from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke that echoes Kierkegaard's philosophy almost perfectly. He writes, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. That is Kierkegaard's final gift to us. To stop waiting for answers, and to start living our way into them. Not with pressure. Not with urgency. But with presence. Because the truth is, most of the answers you think you need don't arrive as words, they arrive as experiences. They arrive quietly in hindsight. When you're walking home one night and realize your heart feels lighter. When you look back and see how far you've come. When the pain that once consumed you has turned into something softer, deeper, even meaningful. That's not solving life, that's living it. So, if you're still asking, what am I supposed to do with my life? Kierkegaard might answer, live it. With doubt, with longing. With mistakes and contradictions. But live it truly. Live it as you. Not as a copy of someone else, not as a puppet of expectation, not as a projection of perfection, but as a flawed, searching, beautifully unfinished human being moving through time with eyes wide open. And maybe that's the most sacred act of all, to be fully alive, without having everything figured out. To laugh even when the ending is uncertain, to rest even when your future is unclear, to care deeply even when you don't know if it will be enough, because that's what it means to be human. Not perfect, not finished, but real. And so, when you feel lost, as you surely will, remember this, you were never meant to walk through life like it was a test with one right answer. You were meant to feel it, to struggle with it. To dance with it. To fall down and get back up and ask again and again, what is true for me now? What am I called to choose today? How can I show up, not with certainty, but with honesty? And in those questions, in those raw, living questions, you will begin to find something more precious than answers, meaning. Not meaning as a grand theory, but meaning as a felt sense, a heartbeat, a moment that says, I am here, I am alive, and this, even this, is mine to live. That's what Kierkegaard wanted us to see. That life isn't about standing still in search of the answer. It's about walking forward. Through fog, through fear, through failure, until one day you look around and realize you're living the answer. Not the one you were waiting for, but the one you created. So take a breath, put down the weight of solving life and just return to it. To the sound of the wind through the trees. To the taste of your next cup of tea. To the text you've been meaning to send. To the idea you've been afraid to try. To this breath, this body. This day. Because no matter what happens next, this is your life. And it's not a problem. It's a reality. To be lived. To be loved. To be yours.